Welcome. My name is Ashley Klein-Jimenez. I am with PreventConnect and CalCASA, and this is a web conference that is being co-hosted with our partners at the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence. The title of this web conference is Moving Power, Authentically Engaging Youth in the Community to Prevent Sexual and Intimate Partner Violence. PreventConnect is a national project of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, sponsored by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The views and information provided in this web conference do not necessarily represent the official views of the U.S. government, CDC, or CalCASA. So we do have some objectives for you today. My biggest objective is for me to stop talking so we can hear from our guests. But we're really looking forward to hearing about really the importance of youth leadership and how adults can play a role in facilitating that as a way to prevent sexual and intimate partner violence. We want to look at some of the opportunities for engaging youth outside of school settings, look at ways where we can meet the interest and capacity of youth leaders while still, using the programs and the goals that we have in our programs. And then we'd also love at the end to maybe just have a little bit of a discussion around the implications of youth-led violence prevention during this pandemic and what, it might look like moving forward. Those are our objectives today. Like I said, I don't want to take up too much time because we have a lot of great people to hear from, but there are just a few things I want to say. And so one thing is that, in my work, before I came to CalCASA and PreventConnect, I did work in local sexual assault prevention programs, and I certainly saw sort of an evolution in terms of engaging youth in prevention. And I think that this evolution is one that, many of us might find ourselves in different points on this evolution, right? Some of us might be very far, some of us might still be kind of figuring out what that looks like for us. But a lot of youth engagement in prevention, I think in the past, has really looked like preventionists talking to youth about prevention, right? Like we give them information, we talk to them, and then there's sort of more intention has been placed on involving youth a bit more in prevention programs. But even then, that could look like, letting youth decide what the theme is for your for your Sexual Assault Awareness Month activities. And so, is that, when we talk about engagement, what are we really talking about? And I think thanks to a lot of youth activism, there's really been a shift in the last couple of years to really letting youth lead in prevention. Tori, if you would move to the next slide, I think that's meant that a lot of practitioners and communities have kind of taken a step back and instead supported youth in being able to define the problem for themselves, create visions of what they actually want to see in the world, how they want the world to look, and then really to be able to come up with their own solutions, whether that was, practice-based solution or some kind of policy. And I think that we've seen a lot of really exciting youth-led activism in other areas too, not just in sexual and domestic violence prevention, but in some related areas. So we've all seen an evolution in terms of what we know youth-led prevention looks like. And I think we've also seen an evolution in what we know works to prevent violence. Tori, if you move to the next slide. The CDC technical packages have really showed us some of the strategies that have evidence of success. And many of the strategies and approaches, and I've just pulled out 3 of the technical packages here. And again, I'm going to give you links, I promise, as soon as I'm done talking. So if you're not familiar with these technical packages, I will provide links to where you can find them. So basically, the technical packages that I have here are related to youth violence, preventing intimate partner violence, and preventing sexual violence. And a lot of the strategies and approaches that are highlighted in the technical package are similar across these forms of violence. And many of them involve engaging and working with young people and youth. So I will give you some more information in the text chat about that. But speaking of CDC, I know, Arlene and Casey, that you all at NRCDV have really been involved with CDC's Intimate Partner Violence Prevention Project of all of the different Delta iterations over the years. And so I'd love if you would share what that looks like and how you all view youth engagement.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And at NRCDV, we're so appreciative of your partnership. So thank you for the invitation. At the Prevent IPV project, actually on our website, we have a section titled Innovation. And that section of our website highlights lessons learned from Delta Focus, which, as many of you know, was a 5-year CDC program that funded 10 state domestic violence coalitions and supported 16 coordinated community response teams to change the environments and conditions in which people live, work, and play. So right now, 4 of the 7 stories are available at PreventIPV.org, including the trauma-informed community building story, which inspired today's web conference. And that offers examples of youth-led, youth-driven programs and activities. Then there's also, we want to highlight the Engaging Youth in IPV Prevention story, which features approaches that focus on building youth's leadership skills, engaging them in shifting norms related to violence, and strengthening community-level protective factors. For each story on PreventIPV.org, we offer lessons learned, highlighted strategies, tools for adaptation, highlighted projects, and related resources from Delta Focus grantees. So if you haven't checked those out, we really encourage you to do so. It's inspiring to kind of see what's been learned so far. We actually connected these two stories for Teen Dating Violence and Awareness and Prevention Month this year around the themes of community connectedness and mobilization for social change. So if you could advance the slide, I'll turn it over to Arlene to share more.
All right. Thank you so much, Casey. And thank you, PreventConnect, for always hosting these amazing conferences, webinars, and for collaborating with us on hosting this particular webinar. It's really exciting stuff, so I won't take long so we can get to our fantastic presenters that we have lined up today. So in addition to what Casey mentioned, we did highlight the 2 Delta Focus stories that was previously mentioned, but at NRCDV, we are also intentional about breaking down the silos between prevention and increased awareness. So what you'll see here is our One Thing campaign that we also connected to the prevention Delta Focus stories to make that connection between increased awareness and the need for prevention strategies. So for us, it's an and, it's not an or. We need increased awareness, we need increased knowledge, but we also need effective prevention strategies in order to mobilize communities and achieve real social transformation. And I think that's what we all want. So on a national level for us, typically for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we lead those efforts in developing campaigns and messages for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. But for Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, we typically, the words Ashley just used, we step back and we collaborate with local, statewide, and other national organizations to lift up and highlight youth-led, youth-focused, and youth-defined campaigns and messaging. So, for example, for Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month, and that's another thing at the National Resource Center, we're really intentional about leaving prevention in the title of the month and the messaging throughout the month. We know a lot of organizations have, intentionally taken out prevention from the title, and they say, or they'll have efforts in February for Teen Dating Violence Awareness. So we're really intentional about leaving in prevention. But going back to adaptation, we, for February 2020, we lifted up Break the Cycle. We connected our messaging to their Outrage into Action campaign. It fit real nicely. They were being intentional about lifting up 10 years of, having Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month. So some messaging that they had, it's been 10 years of awareness. Enough is enough. It's time for real action. So that really resonated with our messaging. It really fit nicely with the Delta Focus stories. And some of their messaging also included, together we can shift the narrative around dating violence. We can honor youth voices. We can build community, and we can address the intersection of voices. So for us, that really, brought home our messaging about the need for, again, effective prevention strategies. And you'll hear about a lot of those later on, and also increased knowledge, right? Because we need both. And then we also highlighted, as you'll see, one thing was developed by the Domestic Violence Awareness Project, but also was adapted by Love is Respect for Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month. So some messaging that they had connected to one thing was, by learning one thing about teen dating violence and sharing that with a friend, every teen can make a difference. We're starting at square one together to build healthy relationships from the ground up. By just learning or doing one thing, we can start the conversation about healthy relationships in your friend circle, schools, and communities. I hope you're already seeing the connections to the other Delta Focus stories, right? The messages and key lessons that came from that, and that you'll hear from others. And everyone has a part in ending dating violence. Even if that one thing seems small in the moment, every step towards ending dating violence is an important one. Another example for messaging: when we work together and each do one thing to prevent dating violence and foster healthy relationships and communities, real social change is possible. So in wrapping up and in closing, I want to highlight a quote from one of our technical assistance questions that we highlighted during the month of February, and we'll give you resources where to find all of this towards the end. This was developed in collaboration with the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center to highlight their Native Love project. And the piece featured Rebecca Baylog and Tanae LeClaire. And the project Native Love explores ways to explore and foster connections between adult advocates and youth activists and leaders, particularly in Native communities. So that's another thing. In order for us to really achieve real transformation, we have to be culturally relevant. We have to be in communities. And that's what you'll learn more about. We have to mobilize communities and engage with communities in a meaningful way. So when we think about mobilizing communities and engaging youth in a meaningful way, again, we must be culturally relevant. And these words from this young person has resonated with me and has stuck with me for years. And I want to share this with you. When asked where to begin, Tanae from the project, from the Native Love Project, said, "I do think it is always respectable to go through elders and include them in any plans. But nowadays, I believe youth leaders are taking charge of their own fights as well. I would not count out youth leaders directly. They should be your main contact points. Those youth probably have mentors or are connected to the right tribal leaders, traditional, at school, or in the community, that have a good relationship and are respected by the youth you will be inviting." So again, that's from a young person from Native Love in collaboration with the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. And I'll close there and pass it on. I think I'm passing on to Tori and Ashley. And then again, you'll get, towards the end, you'll get resources as to where you can find the information that I highlighted. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Arlene and Casey. Appreciate you both so much. And I did put some of the links to the Delta Focus stories and the Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month 2020 Turning Outrage into Action link. So I really encourage you all, if you haven't, if you're not familiar with those resources, to head over there after the web conference. But right now, we'd love to hear from you. We are going to introduce our first set of guests in just a moment. But we'd love to hear from you. How are young people shaping your prevention efforts? What does that look like in your community, in your work? Let us know in the text chat. I think that we're probably all seeing it a little bit different in our community based on our local context. So we're going to keep an eye on what you all have to say, and we will come back and look at some of the themes and pull out some of the really exciting things that you all are doing with young folks. But right now, I want to move over and introduce you to our guests from Delaware. So we have quite the team that you'll be hearing from. But I'm really excited for both our Delaware guests and our guests in Indiana. Not only do we have a representative from the coalition, but we also have the community partners that are doing the work. And so right now, I'd really like to introduce you to Courtney Winkler. Courtney is with the Delaware Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And Courtney, I am going to turn this party over to you.
Great.
It's all yours.
Thanks so much, Ashley. And thank you to you and Tori and all of PreventConnect for having us today. So I would like to start out, in my role at the coalition, our role is really to lift up the local programs that are doing the work. So I would just like to give some framing to the work that we're doing, and then turn things over to the team at Child Inc. So as Casey and Arlene had mentioned, we were funded under the CDC's Delta Focus program to implement strategies to change environments and conditions in which people live, work, and play. So through our coordinated community response team here in Delaware, and through Child Inc., which is a local organization, we were looking to really implement the community-specific prevention approach with youth called Safe and Respectful. So just to give you a little background about Child Inc., they are a multi-service nonprofit agency based in Newcastle County, Delaware, and they offer a variety of services to the community, including parenting education, domestic violence treatment and services, foster care services, programs for runaway and homeless youth, and community-based programming. Child Inc. has a long history and exceptional rapport with the Sparrow Run neighborhood, which is where our prevention efforts were focused. So Tori, if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So our prevention efforts that Child Inc. was really working on through this project are focused in the Sparrow Run neighborhood. It's a townhome community of over 500 homes, and the majority are low-income renters. This particular neighborhood has a history of systemic adversity and individual, community, and historical trauma. While other service providers have drifted in and out over the years, the Family Resource Center, operated by Child Inc., has been a consistent presence for over 2 decades. People really know that they can rely on them, and they are going to be there to help and support them. So the Resource Center really serves as a hub for residents who are seeking any kind of supportive services, including employment assistance, food programs, parenting classes, and counseling services. In addition, Child Inc. also operates Kids Place, which is dedicated to services exclusively for children and youth in the community. Kids Place really offers the community youth a safe place for education, recreation, and community service, and also serves as the home base for the Safe and Respectful program implementation. Through Kids Place, the staff run separate groups for male-identified and female-identified youth, but also engage in activities as a whole group. So Safe and Respectful, the program, was aimed at affecting the social and structural determinants of health by engaging youth in activities to increase community connectedness with their network of caring adults, which are both known protective factors for IPV and other types of violence. So it was really an opportunity to empower the youth while also engaging them with role models who could show them that there are great things that you can be doing in the community. So the Safe and Respectful Prevention Project was in place before Delta Focus came into play, but was restructured to really concentrate on this specific community through the groups that were run at Kids Place. So in addition to other opportunities for engaging youth, the focus of the work through the program included implementation of the evidence-based youth development program, YES, the Youth Empowerment Solutions for Peaceful Communities, out of the Prevention Research Center of Michigan at the University of Michigan School of Public Health. And from the outset, YES just seemed like the perfect fit for this group in this community. There was a focus on violence prevention, community change through an empowerment lens and a trauma-informed framework. So it really just seemed like there were so many opportunities for kids to engage and learn and make a difference. And so to meet the needs of this particular community, the team also adapted the program to include supplemental activities like talking about healthy relationships, talking about gender norms, trauma-informed activities, all while focusing on team building, neighborhood trust, and social cohesion. So really, again, bringing things back to building that community within the within Kids Place. Okay, we could go on. Thank you. So for our role at the coalition, like I said, we were really here to support. And so one of the things that both the Kids Place staff and we as a coalition found that, nothing is perfect and adaptation is necessary. And I know that Arlene mentioned this earlier, that adaptation is really the key to successful engagement. And so we would hold meetings at Kids Place to really get a feel for the community and what was going on and kind of what would work in that environment. We looked at the challenges and successes that they were experiencing and brainstormed ways to create more positive experiences for everyone who was involved. So when working with kids, you know that you have to really think on your feet and always have a backup plan. You've got to have plans A, B, and C waiting in the wings because something is guaranteed not to work. And we also know that while having a packaged curriculum can be a godsend, it can be great, but at the same time, it doesn't always meet your needs. So it has to be adapted to meet the needs of the community. So a few things that we found in adapting the program and adapting the curriculum included that ongoing community building. As I mentioned earlier, the focus neighborhood was really consisting primarily of renters and still does. So there were a lot of families who were cycling in and out, which also meant that kids in the group were changing on a regular basis. So there was that need for, instead of just doing one team building activity at the beginning or really focusing on that had to be a continuous process. So there was that continuous focus on team building and trust exercises to really build that group cohesion and engagement. Another thing that we had to look at was the activities that were part of the curriculum. Kids have sat in school all day. They don't want to come to Kids Place after school and have to do more school type work. So they just weren't interested in engaging in some of those activities. And some of the activities that were prescribed weren't necessarily things that they enjoyed. For example, there was one art activity as part of the curriculum that involved drawing a cartoon on paper. And the kids didn't want to do it that way. They wanted to be able to use their own medium and own approach. So just little things like that that's giving the power back to the kids to make those decisions and decide how they're going to engage is so critical. The staff also provided opportunities for the students to lead activities and be the teacher, really showing them those leadership skills and building that, but also gaining insight to what their expectations were for how the group was to be run. And finally, just really encompassing all of this is the element of trauma-informed care, knowing that in a community that's dealing with trauma on a regular basis, it was really important to take cues from the kids. And I know that Latasha and Eric will talk a little bit more about this. But there were times where there was a police presence in the neighborhood or a fight at school or trouble at home. And kids wanted to talk about those things. They didn't want to do what was scheduled. They really needed to process and walk through those things that they were dealing with. So that could mean that the curriculum had to be pushed aside and things had to be put on hold. So really just adapting that and knowing that the timeline was going to be flexible, the content was going to be flexible, and it was all about meeting the needs of the community. And so with that, I would really like to turn it over to Michelle to talk a bit more about the work and the team and the opportunities that they've discovered while empowering youth. Michelle, are you there?
Thank you, Courtney. Michelle here. Hi from the team at Child Inc. We can have the next slide. I am here. We love to talk about our community engagement with youth in Sparrow Run. This was all made possible by a commitment from Child Inc., our agency to services for the community and families. I think that originally, we can go to the next slide. We started in Sparrow Run in 1996. This was a small grant from the state to address issues of child abuse and neglect. And it morphed into so much more. This community, as Courtney said, is about 560 unit townhouse units. And we found that the more we spent getting to know the family, the more we uncovered ways that we could be helpful. I'm going to give you a short picture of who we are and where we are in this community, and then let Latasha, Eric, and Donna talk about real specifics of the programming. Sparrow runs in Newark, Delaware. And when we were established in '96, we had a very small funding source. Currently, we have state, county, and federal money that helps support our programming there. The center is a very active place for a variety of programs, including a very big food program, information and referral. We have domestic violence counseling for victims and kids, and then a whole wide-ranging educational and homeschool liaison assistance. Big part of our work is community engagement. Dedicated staff have made this successful. I think the idea of having people who have their hearts in this work is half the battle. The Resource Center became very, very busy, and with family and youth programming. And so in 2014, we were very fortunate to have the commitment of Child Inc.'s board, and we were able to establish another center just around the corner dedicated to kids, named Kids Place. Kids Place, we can go to the next slide. Kids Place is designed for community youth and ages 6 to 18. I think that currently we have 2 full-time staff, a part-time staff, and then we have a variety of volunteers and interns that assist. It is the talents of staff and volunteers sort of directs programming. In a typical year, school year, we'd have a very active homework club, which has been postponed this year. We also, this is where safe and respectful programming was centered. And I think that at this point, what I'd like to do is have Latasha talk specifically about Kids Place.
Hi, yes, could you advance? Thank you. So I'll just share our mission statement at Kids Place. And our mission is to provide a safe, entertaining, and engaging environment in which children and youth can further their academic and creative talents while becoming interested and invested in their own community, leading to a strong and secure neighborhood. So the pillars of our programming focus on education, recreation, and community service. Our programming is grouped by ages. We service youth, elementary, middle schoolers, and high school. And we operate on a trauma-informed approach. So we like to be intentional in how we engage with the youth and how we respond to challenging situations. So when challenges arise, we want to avoid asking what's wrong with you, but instead ask what's happened to you. And some of these pictures just kind of highlight some of the activities, some trips we've been on, our computer center that we have here at Kids Place, and then our community service work with the youth. Next slide, please. So I'll briefly discuss just a little bit about Safe and Respectful and my role as the facilitator for the girls group. So we would meet weekly here at Kids Place and try to have lessons and activities focusing on ways to promote healthy relationships, but also to build teams and have group cohesion, and finding ways to have our youth more connected and engaged in the community that they live in. So a lot of our activities focused on those, and definitely hearing from the teens and allowing them to be the voice for things that they wanted to see happen in their community, whether it be a community Easter egg hunt or movie night in the park, was very, really powerful for us and for me to kind of make sure we find ways to make that happen. Next slide, please. So some of the lessons that we learned while engaging the youth through Girls Group are to utilize a trauma-informed approach. Like Courtney said, we recognize that sometimes girls will come to group sessions and really not be into what we had planned to do. So it was time for me to take a step back and, utilize that moment to allow them to discuss topics or situations that were important to them. That way it addressed, their concerns, but also showed that I'm invested in what's important to them as well. Another component that is critical is establishing rapport and trust with the youth. Before you can do any form of programming or, reach out, you have to build relationships. An important way to do that is to connect with the youth. The importance of teamwork among staff and unified messaging, and provide a sense of consistency in programming and expectations. So not only allowing the kids to help create some expectations, but also ensuring that it's consistent throughout the programming. So not only in group where they expected to, engage and behave in certain ways, but also throughout Kids Place and out on field trips. So just making sure that those expectations and teamwork were consistent among all. Model respect and effective communication, and focusing on the whole child, meaning that we serve and recognize each child as an individual, but we like to address the needs and concerns of their families, and also serve and support the community as a whole. Next slide. Just some of the challenges that I recognize while engaging youth during Girls Group is that they sometimes will make it hard for you to connect with them. I came onto the project toward the end, so there was, definitely some walls built up, a new person coming into their space. It took some creative ways for me to try to, break some of those barriers that they had, and finding ways to meet with them individually, to connect with them, and doing things that, would allow that space for them to trust me. So those were important. Behavioral or mental health concerns can present challenges. So if they arise or they are identified, that would be time for me to, discuss with my supervisor so that we can get the support that the youth would need. Also, it would be ideal for us to connect with parents, and sometimes that was possible, but there were times when it wasn't. Parents are working, they have other kids to tend to, and sometimes they weren't engaged. So we just had to find creative ways to kind of handle those situations as well. Understanding that peer relationships can impact participation. There were times when youth would simply not be interested in coming to group because they wanted to hang out with their friends, or there would be times when their friends are the ones who were encouraging them and, motivating them to attend. So it was just kind of like a give or take. And I had to find ways to keep them engaged and making sure that I was listening to what they needed and really hearing what they wanted so that they would be participating as much as possible. And lastly, being savvy about the impact that social media has on relationships and programming. So just being aware of what they're getting into, the messages that they're receiving, so that we can try to counteract some of those negative messages, but also be supportive if we find out that there are some bullying behavior or other negative behaviors going on that, we need to pay attention to. Next slide, please. And then these are just some pictures that highlight some of the activities we participated in during Girls Group, trying to continue that team building when new members would start, or even existing members were still there. And two of the pictures kind of highlight a video project that we did with the girls, just to kind of get some fun activities in here to get their creative talents flowing and continue building that group cohesion. And we also did participate in many community service events. And that's all I have for now. And I'll pass it on to Eric.
Thank you. So I'll talk about key factors for engaging youth. I have a social work background, so as soon as I got to the program, I began to realize that a lot of the youth were exposed to repeated forms of violence, from domestic violence in their household to gang-related activity or drug-related activity in the community. So every time the group would collect or come together, the way they were presenting for each group was a lot different. Sometimes that meant that they would sit down, but a lot of times it meant that I had to disengage them from group, take them outside, either play basketball or football, or just do things to help them burn off some of their energy, or help them decrease some of their anxiety. Most of the time, I allowed them to pick the activities. I would even empower them by giving one of the boys the ball to make sure that he kept track of it and would bring it back to group. Was also aware that they were having day-to-day challenges, not only in their households, like a few of the kids, although they would consistently come to the group, they were running away from home, having behavioral challenges in school. So some of that was just based upon there may be a food shortage in their household. They may have had older siblings that already were participating in gang activity. So their caregivers really had a lot of struggles, and some of it was race related. Sometimes it may be related to class. So one of the things I made a priority was to go to each individual kid's house, maybe once a month, maybe every 2 weeks, and just meet the family, but also demonstrate to the kids that they had value to me by making sure that I went into the space that they were in on a daily basis and show them that I had some comfortability with it. We also did a strength-focused approach with them. What that looked like for the boys was a lot of times the material was extremely academic or too didactic for them. So if it focused on something like anger, being outside, having a football toss or just playing a football game allowed me as a adult male to model for them some of the strategies that it would talk about in the curriculum. So I would use those opportunities to sometimes role model through them becoming aggressive with one another, or getting into microaggressions, or just becoming very hyper and not managing their emotions real well. I would just use those opportunities to focus on their strengths, talk about things that were a part of why they were a cohort or why they were a particular clique. The group we had was very enmeshed. They came from kind of the same neighborhoods within the community. So they spent a lot of time outside of the program together. So they would like to do a lot of things together. So I also became very educated, and I think it's extremely important to remember how development will factor into how you have to run the group. Initially, I believe we had the lowest age was 12. And what was happening is the 12-year-olds were having a lot of difficulty processing information that may be shared by a 15 or 16-year-old. And I would have to actually spend individual time sometime to help get the 12-year-old up to speed, whereas we had some 13-year-olds that were just advanced academically or a little bit more mature, or they had gone to private schools that allowed them to have more information or process a little bit differently. You definitely need to develop some thick skin and pick battles. If you're not aware, middle school age boys do a lot of pushing and pulling. They do a lot of bumping and running into you and closing personal space. A lot of times I didn't realize in the beginning that's their way of developing connections with males. They haven't seen a lot of males that look like them in their community. More importantly, something that was said to me in the beginning that I think is extremely valuable: when you engage youth, make sure your intent is to stay rather than just come for, a little bit or a season. A lot of kids experience a lot of trauma because human services workers or practitioners come into their communities. And of course, we have lives and we may transition on, but understanding the sustainability of those relationships become important, because if they're experiencing those developmental milestones, us just being there as a constant to either guide, encourage, or support them becomes important. Next slide, please. So notes that we took were many community experiences were, in which I was just mentioning, there just weren't a lot of healthy male role models. It became interesting because I have some connection to that particular community, and a lot of the middle school age youth that we were engaging, boys and girls alike, I would know their parents or I would know a relative, and they may go home and make mention of coming to the program and engaging with me. And the parent may now have some interest piqued in wanting to come and see what the program is about just because there's someone from the community connected to trying to support or help guide their child. It's also important for youth to hear from people that look like them. And I would connect that to when I would go to their houses a lot of times, a lot of the men that typically don't engage in programs, although we had a lot of single parent or multi-generational families that we were engaging in terms of the youth that we were serving, the houses that did have a male and a female in them, a lot of the men did not like to get engaged in the programming, but were a lot more comfortable when I went to their houses and talked to them, in the space that they resided in. A big part of working with the youth for me, and I think at Child Inc. that we actually learned is knowing what doesn't work and again, having thick skin around it. Kids would literally demonstrate to us things would not work by not just coming to group, or they would come to group by like hanging in front of the building, but not wanting to come in for that particular day. So on those days, as you'll hear my colleagues talk about, we would just shift the focus. I think another very important thing too is we never think about kids experiencing a level of constant or persistent stress that they do. And the fact is sometimes they just need us to listen to them because we think kids have a voice, but most kids feel voiceless, especially boys. They don't always have a male to listen to them. Often people are talking at them rather than talking with them or listening to them. So I would encourage us today on this conference to understand the importance of recruiting more men into this field because it takes a diverse group of people to engage all the populations we look to serve. And the more people we have that are diverse, the better we can serve those that we look to provide services to. Next slide. These are just pictures. And as I mentioned, one of the benefits for me is I never considered, even though my focus was to engage the middle school age boys, I developed a lot of strong relationships with the sisters of those boys or cousins or siblings because a lot of the young ladies just didn't have a lot of healthy interaction with men that look like them. Most of the people that come into their community are either civil service workers or they're coming there to engage them in services that don't particularly focus on either empowering them or being a conduit to help them do something they would like. The picture at the top is just me with a group of the girls that were part of the girls group. At the bottom, those were actually the initials. So I was in the project for 3 years from the beginning till, ongoing now. But that group at the bottom are the initial group of boys that aged out. The middle pictures, we run a community day. During that community day, we come out. And I'll often try to get other men, and we actually help to coach, and we referee the games for them. So we start with the youngest kids that we serve to the oldest. And then the last picture is just them on a public outing for another activity that they engage through Child Inc. I believe that's my last slide. I'll pass it to Donna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Donna Johnson. I am the program coordinator of the Sparrow Run Family Resource Center. And even though the Resource Center and the Kids Place are separate buildings, we really function as one. Latasha, Eric, and Chanel and I work closely together. And I'd just like to kind of recap what Latasha and Eric had spoke about and the ideas that we developed to make our youth leadership a success. So the very first one that is very important is the outreach part of it. It's meeting the community and meeting the youth, not expecting people to walk into the resource center all the time or Kids Place all the time. For us, we get out into the community. We introduce ourselves to the new youth in the community. We go into the homes and meet the parents and try to get a good idea of what's going on in the home, to allow the family and the children to know that we're there for them, and which establishes trust through our actions by going out into the community, letting them know that we're interested and that we care about them and their children. And then what we do is we encourage the youth and identify their strengths. We encourage them to come to the kids' place, participate in the programs, stop over the resource center, invite their parents to come with them. And then we found that by listening more, listening to the youth, not doing all the talking, letting the youth do the talking, we found that we're able to better identify their strengths that way as well. And then they feel pretty confident in coming to us and talking with us and letting us know how they're feeling about things. And then what we do is we guide them more than we direct them. So we listen to what their interests are. We listen to what they feel their talents are. And then the conversation just grows. And from there, we really get to know where they're coming from. So then we practice effective communication in the group. It's an opportunity to practice respect for each other's ideas. And we withhold judgment about any project ideas. We just let them tell us what they're thinking, what they want to do, and they give us the ideas. And then we help them focus on the process for getting to their goals. And what we do there is they tell us what it is they want to do. And then, for example, they wanted to, when they were going to take the trip to Washington, D.C. to the African American Museum, they wanted to eat in the restaurants there instead of taking a bagged lunch. So they decided they wanted to develop their own program, make their own money. And so to help them focus, we said to them, okay, we're here for you. We can meet, let's meet once a week, but you have to be on time. You have to come prepared with your ideas and be willing to take control of this project. So through that, they were empowered. They did their own planning. They put forth their best effort. The staff was there just to kind of assist them. And then in the end, we celebrate even the small successes. They don't have to be super large successes, but in this particular project that they worked on for the entire summer, and then the goal was to have their own flea market tables set up at the annual community day that we do every year. So at Community Day, they did set up their tables. Their goal was to reach $500 by the end of Community Day. They, at the end of the day, they did reach their goal. And we celebrated that. That was a huge success for them. Could you go to the next slide, please? And these are just some pictures of like the bottom picture is Community Day. They are the children who took part in the project from the beginning, developing it, and then carrying through to the end. And then as you see the group in Washington. They went to the museum. They were able to eat in the restaurant that they wanted to eat in. And then you can see up here when we discussed the listening and listening to what they wanted to do. There was a group of middle school kids who were going to Kids Place, and in the afternoons when it was not their time to be at Kids Place, they would walk over to the resource center and they would talk to my staff and I, and they were saying how they get tired of sometimes being around the younger elementary kids. So Kids Place and the Resource Center got together, discussed with them what they would like to do. And this is in front of the first picture where they're sitting in the circle are the middle schoolers at what we called, they came up with the name Chill Zone. So they would meet every Friday during the summer. We'd have a barbecue out in front of the Resource Center, and they'd sit and talk about things that they were interested in, what was going on in the community, and what else they wanted to do. And it was just middle schoolers enjoying the time together. So it's really about getting out into the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donna. And I just wanted to thank Michelle, thank you so much for giving us some of that background and really setting that conversation up. Latasha and Eric, I hope you're keeping check on the text chat because there's just a lot of, kudos and interest in the work that you're doing. And so I hope that you saw some of that. There may be a question or two in there too. I'll try to go weed some of that out. And Donna, thank you so much for kind of tying that up. It's so cool to see how you're really approaching all of the work you're doing from such a trauma-informed space, and how you're being able to support youth and being and feeling, the importance of being connected to their community, and just the relationships that you've been able to establish with caring adult role models. So thank you so much. We'd love to hear from you all about how you feel like, given the current circumstances and trying to build relationships with youth, how can you build those relationships and shift power back to youth right now? What are some of your ideas for doing that? So we'd love if you would share any ideas, anything that you're currently doing in the text chat. We'd love to learn from you all. But at this point, I am going to pass this over to our next set of guests in Indiana. And again, we're going to start with Colleen Wiesel from Indiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Colleen, thank you so much. I'm super excited to hear from Shatoya and Stephanie. But will you just start us out and talk about how you all are really shifting power back to youth in Indiana?
Sure. Thanks, Ashley. I'm feeling super joyful to be in conversation and community with preventionists from all of the time zones. So excited to talk with you. I'm also mindful that we are over time, so I'm going to try to speed through my content and hand it over to my Indiana colleagues. But I get to coordinate prevention programs through the Indiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And as the state coalition, we provide training, technical assistance, resources, and also funding to support local communities and their youth engagement work. But we also wanted to do this at the state level. So we have engaged young people as part of a statewide youth advisory council, as student interns, and also as collaborators in data collection from across Indiana. We know that young people are disproportionately impacted by multiple forms of violence. So we knew that we wanted young people to be a focal point in our prevention work, but we were also so conscious and clear that young people themselves are not the problem. We recognize that young people are practicing relationship behaviors in this cultural landscape that adults have built and handed off to them. So we really wanted to engage with young people as leaders in solutions, not just to deliver information to them as the focal point of the problem. So this quote you have was a statement that one of our youth council members said early on: young people want to be engaged as world changers. And so that has been our orientation to how we work with youth. Next slide, please. So when we think about, you can give me a couple more clicks there, Tori, thanks. So when we think about the why of violence, we think that violence is prevalent in our lives across our communities. Multiple forms of violence are prevalent because violence makes sense. It just makes sense culturally. We believe that inequities in power between people create motivation for the use of abuse, and that broad normative tolerance of multiple forms of violence just really allows multiple forms of violence to thrive. So we really think of this as a problem of power. So for that reason, we've really, in our prevention strategy, flipped the script from kind of adults standing at the front of the room, holding on to power and telling young people about relationships, to instead inviting young people to join with us in defining the problem and also determining solutions. So learning from the Malalas, learning from the Gretas, just inviting young people into this conversation. Okay, excellent. Next slide. So here are just some of the strategies that we've used to engage young people as current impactful leaders in violence prevention work, but also to develop a set of skills that would support them in a lifetime of advocacy. So young people have engaged with us in data collection. They've facilitated focus groups. They've administered surveys, focus groups with adults and surveys with their peers, and then worked with us to collect and analyze that data to really define the problem. They've engaged in a range of professional communication strategies, from communicating with legislators. They have written public service announcements. They developed their own storyboards and pitched that PSA to a professional communication company. So these leaders were really taking their direction from the young people. They write blogs. They present conferences to adults and also with their peers. They've done radio interviews, planned for and facilitated a youth summit for youth council members from all over the state. They've written letters to the editors of papers across Indiana and also to legislators. Really, again, telling adults in leadership positions, these are our needs, these are our priorities, these are the things we need to have safe and respectful communities and relationships. And next slide. And this is just one example that I wanted to lift up and tell you about. This is an activity my colleague Sierra Thomas Williams facilitated in collaboration with youth councils located across Indiana. We participated in an activity to ask young people, what do you need in your community to feel safe, stable, and nurtured? What do you need? What do you need? What can we do as adults to make respectful relationships the easy choice in your community? And we collected data from all those conversations around the state, and our youth council helped us to analyze and code that data. And we identified these 5 top priorities that young people have for safety, stability, and nurturance in their communities. So they were focused on connectedness. They want to live in safe, nonviolent communities. They want acceptance and inclusion, support for personal growth. And we were surprised by the degree to which they were focused on the need for stable basics in their families and their communities, things like stable, safe housing, food security, things like that. So we used this guidance from young people to create the graphic that you see. We call it our treasure map, that provides a menu, a delicious, broad menu of ways in which adult leaders and young people can work to increase these conditions in the community to prevent multiple forms of violence. So connectedness is one that you see there, and under the activities, strategies for that young people are recommending include everything from investing in youth engagement activities in the community to thinking about and addressing policies that separate families, things like criminal justice, incarceration policies, and immigration policies. They encourage us to create inclusive environments across identities with particular attention to young people with disabilities to allow space that invites connectedness in. So this is just one example of the outcomes from our youth leadership, and we use this to inform our prevention strategy at the state level, our investment, our public policy advocacy. So with that, I will hand it over to my Indiana colleague, Stephanie, because she is amazing, and also because it's her birthday.
Well, I didn't expect all these over 300 people to hear about my birthday. Thanks everybody for having me. I am the prevention coordinator at the Youth Services Bureau of Monroe County. We're in South Central Indiana in the city of Bloomington, and we're part of our local county government. We provide resources to the community in 4 ways. Of course, prevention, and you're going to hear all about that today. But we also have the Binkley House Emergency Youth Shelter, which is a 21-day shelter for youth 8 to 17 who are experiencing crisis. We administer our Safe Place program for part of the region. Most of you probably know it, but it's a youth-initiated program connecting folks with access to counselors, emergency shelter, or community service. Community services or resources, all driven by the young person. And additionally, YSB has MSW counselors available for shelter residents and families, as well as the wider community. So today I'm going to talk about the role of youth engaged in prevention. So YSB prevention efforts used to be located at the individual and relationship levels and more focused on education and awareness. But over the last 5 years, really with the influence of BTCC, which I'm about to talk about them, we've recognized the value in expanding prevention efforts to include community level strategies, including the creation of protective environments and building connections between youth and caring adults and activities. And we really believe that ultimately these reduce the need for emergency services just as they prevent multiple forms of violence. So one way that we recognize our value is by supporting our prevention subcommittees, including building a thriving compassionate community, or BTCC, which is a cross-sector network taking a system-level approach to building protective environments. To ensure the broadest impact, we at BTCC select the strategy of improving social conditions through promoting and institutionalizing protective factors, using that same strategy of safe, stable, nurturing relationships and environments that Colleen just talked about. And as many of you know, this strategy has been shown to prevent negative outcomes among children and families and build a positive foundation for youth to grow and thrive. So I'll share with you now a couple of ways we put prevention work into action with young people. So I want to start with the PRISM youth community. And I know later we'll talk a little bit about COVID. We used to meet in person twice a week, but we've been having virtual meetings. And so the graphic you're seeing on the left came from one of our virtual art creation meetings, which was delightful. So YSB supports the PRISM youth community, offering some of my staff time as part of the prevention work we do to act as an adult ally. PRISM Youth Community is an inclusive social group for youth celebrating all sexual orientations, gender identities, and gender expressions. Any person between 12 and 20 is welcome to join. PRISM is run by youth leaders supported by adult allies. PRISM members really have been moving power since they got started. The young people offer panel sessions throughout South Central Indiana, and they teach adults how they can build supportive conditions for LGBTQ+ youth. PRISM's organizational structure is entirely driven by youth leaders who also drive the decision-making, community building, and educational efforts. Next slide, please. So the Monroe County Youth Council is another prevention subcommittee of YSB, and it exists to create opportunities for Monroe County high school students to find their voices, take action, and make an impact on vital community issues. It's a youth-led initiative, and it takes an innovative approach to leadership development because really we're putting the task of program development into the hands of the young people themselves. MCYC has evolved into an initiative where the young people determine their vision, activities, and how they want to contribute. Over the years, MCYC's work to move power has included our youth leaders educating themselves on local government and how they can influence it, marching in youth-led rallies against gun violence, and registering those who will be 18 by the time of an election to vote. And then you can switch to the next slide. We have an example of one of the programs that was led by our youth leaders this year with a grant from the City of Bloomington's Martin Luther King Jr. Commission. MCYC youth leaders created Student Action Day on MLK Day in 2020 at the Boys and Girls Club of Bloomington. They brought together 70 young people and a couple adults. And the youth presenters shared information and opportunities for action around environmental activism, period stigma and access to menstrual hygiene products, and advocating for music education in public schools. Instead of using grant funds to engage in traditional charity work, this group of young people built a sense of solidarity by educating each other and offering opportunities for action. Following the event, the participants were connected with youth-led advocacy, activism, and service opportunities. And the menstrual hygiene kits that they built went to our local domestic violence shelter and a provider of transitional housing for youth experiencing homelessness. And then if you can switch to the next slide. So another forum that Youth Move Power that's part of our prevention programming at Youth Services Bureau is the Monroe County Childhood Condition Summit, which we call MC3. And since the first summit in 2016, YSB and BTCC have worked together to convene over 200 community members for MC3. Our themes have included what surrounds us shapes us, child and adolescent health, connections, and finally, most recently, equity and inclusion. The decision to organize the event around conditions was based on the understanding that a lot of our speakers have talked about today, that young people are shaped by the relationships they have, the neighborhoods they live in, the places they learn and play, and the community organizations that serve them. So when children have access to stable, nurturing relationships and environments, they're more likely to thrive, and thriving children are more likely, as we all know, to grow into thriving adults. So each year, participants in the summit have been adults who hold power and make decisions in sectors like child welfare, education, social services, higher education, juvenile justice, city and county government. We usually also have a couple of elected officials at each summit. And the important part here is that youth are building power and influence by leading adults through sessions and content and telling them how to best partner with young people to build supportive conditions. I'm really excited to turn the mic over to Toya Moss, who I've been honored to partner with in this work.
Thank you, Stephanie, and happy birthday again. Hello, all. I am Shatoya Moss, the Safe and Civil City Director for the City of Bloomington. My work focuses on inclusion, diversity, equity, safety, and education for the city. I also serve as a liaison to the Commission on the Status of Black Males and the Commission on the Status of Children and Youth. I look forward to sharing some information about what we do. Next slide, please. Again, I do serve as a liaison to the Commission on the Status of Children and Youth. Their mission is to promote connections in our community which empower, enhance, and nurture children. Listed are some of their primary initiatives: the Swagger Awards, Teen Roundtable, and Youth Participatory Budgeting. Notable that prior to 2020, the commission was made of parents, teachers, and those who worked with youth. The decisions and initiatives coming out of the commission were very much still adult in form. To successfully advocate for youth, we must directly involve and work with youth. They have voices and they are capable of wielding power and decision-making. Thus, Youth Participatory Budget, or YPB for short, was developed for the City of Bloomington. So what is YPB? YPB is a democratic process in which young people in our community decide how to spend part of the municipal budget. In our case, it was 27 middle and high school students from the Bloomington area. YPB has 5 major steps. 1, design the process. Writing the rules is the first step of YPB. This is when we develop and review the guidelines that we put in place to solidify how we want the process to go. During this phase, we develop a timeline and work a plan for each stage of the process, assemble a steering committee that is a representative of the community that includes members of underserved areas, and communicate decision-making roles to the steering committee and the public. Step 2 is brainstorming ideas. During this phase, we collect initial ideas for the community, improvements from Bloomington resident that meets the age requirement. Step 3, develop proposals. Volunteers called delegates develop proposal ideas with the youth. We turn developed project proposals into the ballot to the public for vote. Step 4, community members in grades 7 through 12 vote on the top 2 projects from the ballot they would overall like funded. Delegates tally those votes to find which project won overall. And lastly, step 5, fund the winning proposal. Once the winning project has been identified, youth, city departments, and stakeholders work together to put the winning project in place. Next slide, please. YPB gives young people real power to make real decisions over real money. But how is that possible, and where does power come from? In order to ensure that our goal was met, we must supply the youth with means. The City of Bloomington's youth, so 18 and under, was allocated $15,000 to decide what they wanted to see implemented within city limits. This was the first selling point of getting youth involved and trusting us. When handing over power, trust must flow both ways. So we, the adults, ask why would we be interested in 1, giving youth money, 2, their voice, and 3, control over final outcome. What the commission came up with is the following principles: deep community engagement of the youth expanding the YPB project, awareness of community government and issues, improving relationships between youth and government, build credibility in the YPB project, and fund projects that have positive impact within the community. Now that we have our goal and list of principles, the next step was to be realistic. How is power managed? We didn't exactly give a bunch of teens cash and send them off. We had to establish what we considered YPB laws. These laws ensured that we, the adults, did not interfere and the youth had order amongst themselves. Together with the commission and the steering committee, we developed the following guidelines. Empowerment. Enable local young people to decide how YPB works in their community and across the city. Number 2, transparency. Share information and make decisions as openly as possible. Number 3, inclusion. Make special efforts to engage young people who face obstacles and are often excluded to participate. Number 4, equality. Ensure that every young person can have equal power over public spending. And number 5, community. Bring young people together across traditional lines of division to work together for the good of the whole community. Next slide, please. Young people out in front and behind the scenes. Knowing our goal, we could not completely eliminate the roles of adults. We were very strategic in how to interact with the youths making decisions. Adults directly involved in the YPB process were 2, myself and 1 commissioner. This was done to limit adult interference and power shift. We realized that our kids are conditioned to defer to adults when in professional or more structural settings like City Hall. So we made sure to keep adults away and allow them to take over and own the spaces in City Hall. This type of micro-affirmation made them feel comfortable to express their opinions, say no, and feel simply empowered. We as adults also have to defend our youth's ideas to other adults, bridge networks, provide resources, answer, and of course, some snacks. We had exceptional youth on the YPB team. They already had school, jobs, volunteered, and played sports. We had to make sure access to power did not become a burden. Because we took such great care of the youth designing the process and implementing the plan, we had to make sure we extended that same gratitude to the youth that ultimately made the final decisions. Youth voices focus around equality and equity. How can you make sure that everyone eligible has a chance to submit their ideas and or cast their votes? The steering committee developed clear guidelines on who could submit ideas and votes. This was so that parents or adults could not cast their votes for their child. They connected with eligible schools to ensure students could use their free time or lunchtime to submit ideas or votes, and open space at the local library for youth not in public or private school systems or have access to a computer. Each delegate was responsible for keeping contact with each person who submitted an idea. Their primary roles are to help generate thoughts and promote YPB. This tactic garnered 115 ideas, 80 of them completely unique, and moved on to the next round of development. Their top 5 ideas went to votes were toys in court, toys and items that could distract youth from stressful environment in the courtrooms, choice lunch, a healthy lunch program that allowed kids to pre-select their lunch options, the moss wall, which is an art installation that helps combat pollution and naturally purify the air, apartment recycling bins, provide low-income residents equal access to recycling options, and city Wi-Fi, provide free Wi-Fi in popular outdoor areas, increasing the attendance in some spaces. We received 125 votes from the community members in grades 7 through 12. Overwhelmingly, the youth of the city of Bloomington decided to install an art installation moss wall to purify the atmosphere both in City Hall as well as our local bus station. The outcomes of this project included 11 steering committee members, 15 delegates, 35 weeks of meetings, 80 qualifying ideas, 125 votes, 1 winning idea, and 293 young people involved, empowered by youth. Next slide, please. So what does the YPB project mean for the future youth involvement in city government? What attitudes has it changed, and what opportunities have come from it? It means that youth in our community has the attention of a much wider audience and is open to more possibility of inclusive decision-making. Networking in inner city infrastructures and getting the attention of organizations wanting your input and expertise, entering the idea of Youth City Council focused on youth issues and concerns, as well as lowering the voting age for local elections. YPB has taught us the possibilities and the strength of youth in our community. To date, my kids have presented at the MC3 Summit that Stephanie mentioned, has given 2 presentations to City Council, have given presentations to 3 college courses, 2 at Indiana University and 1 at Ivy Tech, has done numerous radio interviews, and 1 has even become a commissioner herself and is ready to lead the next charge of YPB. Thank you all for your time and consideration. I hope you're able to take something away from that.
Thank you so much, Indiana team. Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so much, Latoya. That was, I really love hearing about all of the initiatives happening in Indiana, but that youth participatory budget, I don't know why. It's just like, it's so exciting to me. And I just think, what a way to help build skills that are so important in so many aspects of life. So thank you, thank you, thank you. As we were talking about this web conference and thinking about the content, of course, this all happened during our whole world shifting. And so one thing that, we really wanted to be attentive to is that I don't think anyone has any perfect solutions right now or has all the answers. But there are a lot of impacts on the work that we're all doing, whether we're engaging youth or, just engaging broader communities during a pandemic. And so I did want to ask, either team if there, what are some of your thoughts on ways that your work might shift, right now? And I know that, depending on where we are, things look different. Things are being relaxed in some places in terms of social distancing or in terms of staying at home. And so I know that it's different, but any comments from either the Delaware team or Indiana on the impact that COVID-19 will have on the work you're doing?
This is Stephanie. I'm happy to start. So it's been really interesting. There already is an impact on the 2 youth-led programs that I work with. The Monroe County Youth Council, at first, the young people were very clear that transitioning to e-learning didn't leave space. But after about a month, we had a really great check-in, and we missed Global Youth Service Day this year. And so we talked about how we could, with it being extended, they extended it to June 19th, how we could engage in mutual aid efforts and then focus again on menstrual hygiene products and getting them out into the community, and really looking at what are the safe, socially distant projects that we can do. And so we're going to work towards having some of those that are going to happen later this month or early next month. And then with PRISM, the youth community, we have a Discord channel, which I'm learning a lot from that. where the kids and the adults can kind of stay in connection all the time. And then we also have done some virtual meetings, which is quite a challenge depending on different people's access to technology and connectivity. But it has, the young people themselves, talking with them on Zoom or anything, any ways we've connected, are what give me hope that our programs will continue on, even if they look different. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Stephanie. And, again, I think that there are lots of creative ways that people are continuing to engage in the work. We did a couple web conferences last month, and there's some great ideas. So I encourage you all to check that out. Indiana or Delaware, any other thoughts? And again, I know nobody has the answers, but it's just, great to hear.
Yeah, this is Courtney, and I know that Stephanie kind of alluded to one of the points that we've been looking at is just the access to technology as we move to more virtual platforms and virtual engagement, just being aware that not everybody has the access that we hope they would. So really trying to make adaptations a little bit broader than just the typical Zoom or online chats.
And this is Michelle. I think that one of the ideas that's been developing, I think we're all getting much more used to and savvy around the technology. But Farrell Run has we've been talking about creating a Facebook page. They already have some Instagram presence for our teen dating violence program, and trying to get the youth more involved in producing content. I think that the conversations are in the developing stage, but I think that given an opportunity, I think that might be a new frontier for us.
This is Colleen. I think with our focus on prevention strategy, really promoting protective environments, I think we just recognize in our youth engagement work and more broadly that that is now more than ever true. The strategies for promoting protective environments can be effective at preventing violence, but also protecting people from COVID and creating conditions that allow them to heal and thrive. So engaging with young people differently by distance, but I think really quadrupling down on the strategy of these protective environments are protective against multiple public health problems.
Thank you so much, Colleen. I think that's a really good point, and something that, definitely as preventionists, we can see where those links are. So thank you all. Tori, would you go ahead and move us to resources? So I wanted to be sure that we are able to hear from all of our presenters. So we will make sure that you have all of these resources. So these are some resources from Indiana that Colleen has provided us with, and we'll make sure to do a document with a list of all of these resources. Arlene and Casey, I know that you all have great resources on PreventITV.org, and then PreventConnect, we have a couple of resources just, continuing the conversation about youth leadership and youth engagement. So we will put all of these in a document and email them to you so you have them and can go through them at your own time. But I just want to thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you to our wonderful guests,